Good day, everyone. My name is Jessica Porras, and I am the Senior Manager for Education and Outreach at CAQH Core. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our Market-Based Adjustment Form Training webinar, which will provide a general overview as well as a live demonstration of the survey submission process. Before we begin, I would like to mention a few logistical items. You can download a copy of today's presentation from the CAQH.org website. To do so, navigate to the Core pull-down menu at the top of the CAQH.org welcome screen, and then select the Core Education Events page. A link to the PDF version of the presentation can be found under the listing for today's webinar. We will save time at the end of today's program dedicated to responding to audience questions. You are encouraged to submit your questions at any time during this webinar by typing them into the questions panel on your dashboard. We do ask that when you submit your question, you identify the type of organization you're with so we can give you a more accurate response. Today, we will begin with two presentations. First on the core code combination maintenance process, and then on the core market-based adjustment survey. We will then do a live demonstration of parts 1 and 2 of the survey so you can become familiar with the process and have time to submit any questions you may have. We will end the webinar with some tips and best practices, and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time to respond to your questions or comments. And now we'll begin today's program with an overview of the core code combination maintenance process by CAQH Core Associate Director Robert Bowman. Bob?
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Jessica. And just as Jessica mentioned, we do want to go over exactly what that maintenance process is so everyone has a firm understanding as they move forward, moving into the review process. CAQH Core is responsible for maintaining the core code combinations via the core code combinations maintenance process. What that means is that between the claim adjustment reason codes, the remittance advice remark codes, and the claim adjustment group codes, the 3 different code sets that are used by health plans to provide information to a provider on the particular reason for denial or adjustment, those codes used in combination really provide that information. Moving on to the next slide, you can see that the industry really determined that we had to have core code combinations for very specific reasons. There's lots of confusion within the provider industry, within the larger healthcare industry even, because the codes were used kind of all over the place. Providers didn't have a clear understanding. There was nothing coming specifically in a uniform and consistent manner in combination with these CAQH, SWARCs, and group codes from the health plans that they were billing. Providers were challenged understanding the hundreds of different code combinations that were coming in because every health plan had their own internal proprietary codes they were using as well as their own internal processes to match and combine those codes together. And also the proprietary business scenarios. So decisions on the CAQHs and RARCs used to explain a specific claim business scenario were left to health plans. So there's lots of subjectivity, there's lots of interpretation, there's lots of unique individual ways of doing about plans. And unfortunately, the providers have to contend with that unique proprietary way of doing things. Another challenge for the industry is that the codes are updated 3 times per year, at least the CAQHs and the RARCs are. So many plans and providers may not have been using those current set of codes. Some plans and providers and software systems weren't being maintained or updating with the new codes, or the codes were being modified, their definitions were being changed. So there was lots of problems just within the code sets through the implementation of the code sets as well, that it was impacting the industry in a negative way. So moving on to the next slide, you can see that before the code combinations, when a healthcare provider provided a service or rendered care and sent a bill to a healthcare payer, the payer would then adjudicate that claim according to their internal processes. They would send back a rejected claim or denied claim or denied claim line, and the provider would have to evaluate what the specific reason was for that denial. Because the denials again, were part of the CAQH, SWARCs, and group codes, and they received a number of different denials from the 12 or so different health plans that the average provider bills. The provider had to do a lot of manual processing on their end because it was confusion because all the different remits that they were getting with different reasons, although it may have been the exact same reason from billing a Humana, billing a Aetna, a Cigna, or a Blues plan, or even a Medicare. So they have to jump on the phone, they have to jump on a web portal and try to understand the exact reason. After the core code combinations came out and the industry implemented them, when a healthcare provider renders service, bills that claim to the healthcare payer, the payer then adjudicates that claim as it did in the previous scenario, but now with the denied information with a consistent and uniform set of CARPs, RARCs, and group codes, all defined within 4 specific business scenarios, that leads to a lot more consistency for the understanding for the exact reason why the claim was denied or the line was adjusted. So the provider can more easily work and put in business processes to rebill those specific claims because they know exactly what piece of data is missing, exactly what service is not covered, what attachment is missing. So it makes it much easier for the provider to do their manual processing for those rebills. Also, as providers start to internalize these processes and internalize the reasons for these types of adjustments and denials, it allows them to build in the initial claim, the initial process, a much better billing of the first time round, so you don't have to go through this rebilling process. So you can set up and learn from your mistakes, basically, or learn from what does this particular health plan always need from me that I forget to keep sending in, this piece of data or this information or this particular eligibility component on this member. So the consistent set of codes helps providers learn the nuances of individual plan billing requirements as well. And part of that code combination maintenance process is maintained by the Code Combinations Task Group here at CAQH Core. Not only do we take in inputs from the updated standard codes list and also input from the industry business need, both of those types of input lead to either a compliance-based review or a market-based review. The compliance-based review occurs 3 times per year and includes adjustments to the core code combinations to ensure that they are aligned with the updated and published code list. Whereas market-based reviews occur just 1 time per year and consider only adjustments to address industry business needs. So this is the opportunity where the industry gets to come in and say, these particular code combinations are not working for us. We need to make adjustments. We need to add to them. We need to delete them. We need to relocate them to a different business scenario. That's really important because the business component has to be taken into consideration to ensure that we have a uniform and complete set of codes that works for the entire industry. And from that, these 4 different business scenarios that you see there on the bottom are all part of that maintenance process. From business scenario 1 with missing or incomplete documentation, to data on business scenario number 2 that may be missing, invalid, or incomplete, to billed services not covered, to benefit for billed service not separately payable. And we have a variety of code combinations within there. Again, remember, it's a complete set of code combinations within each of those business scenarios. Then moving on to the next slide, we can go into our first how the code combination benefits providers. And we did include here some key findings from the industry on exactly what types of problems the providers really have experienced with denials. Some anecdotes here: 90% of denials are preventable, 2 out of 3 denials are recoverable. The costs are exceedingly high and time-consuming to be managed by providers. The denials have a direct impact on revenue. The typical denial rate is anywhere from 5 to 10%, and oftentimes for very specialized claims, it's much, much higher. And historically, CMS denies nearly 10% of all claims. So you can see that the impact of denied claims is huge for providers. And the best way for providers to manage that process is to really dig into that process and understand. Part of that is ensuring that the industry is using a standardized set of core code combinations, and making sure that those core code combinations are not only being used by the health plans and then therefore by the providers, but making sure that they're clean and consistent and accurate and that they meet the business needs. Also, potential reduction of manual claim rework is going to be really important. So better understanding that code combination, what that definition means in combination, so between the CARC and the RARC and the group code, making sure you know exactly what steps you have to follow. Is it a rebill? Is it a write-off? Is it a bill to the member? Knowing that process in and out makes it much easier to actually process those. And reduction in AR days. We've had many provider organizations through our education webinar series reach out and say that they've been able to greatly reduce the number of AR days because they are much more consistent in receiving the denials and the adjustment and being much better able to understand those reasons and be able to post those to a member's AR. So all of these are going to be very important benefits for the provider because the denial management process is very expensive and very time-consuming. And with that, I'll hand the call over to Drew for our first polling question.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bob. And this brings us to our first of 3 polling questions of the webinar. And what will happen here is I will read the polling question, and then you'll see a dialog box pop up on your screen, and we'll pause for just a brief moment for everyone to answer this polling question. So this question asks, approximately what % of your remittance advices in the past year included a situation addressed by the core defined business scenarios? And I will go ahead and get this poll launched. And you should see it appear on your screen. So please go ahead and make your selection, and then we will, I'll share the results, and Bob, maybe we'll get some feedback very quickly before we move on. So just take about 10 seconds here to answer this poll. Take about 5 more seconds. Try to have a majority of our audience cast a vote here. Okay. We will close the poll, and I will share the results. And Bob, it looks like the majority here, 58% say that they're uncertain if this has happened, and then 15% indicating about 26 to 50%, and then 13%, 76 to 100%. So what do you have to say about these people who answered that they were uncertain? How could they find out?
It's a good point. I think that what we've done when we actually developed the core code combinations, we looked at the 80-20 approach. So of the 4 business scenarios that kind of percolated to the top and where we've developed core code combinations for those 4 business scenarios, these 4 business scenarios addressed a majority of the problems that providers said that they were having in understanding the exact reason for the denial or the adjustment. So we're seeing that, high percentages here, 50, some of these are 100% fall into these categories. So that's really good news that we're seeing that many providers agree that these are the ones that cause the most problems, they cause the most denials, they are the ones that are the most difficult to understand. For those that are marking uncertain, they may not actually be receiving remittance advices potentially, and also they may not know the specific detail for the reasons for denials that perhaps their staff are working. But I think that most of the folks would agree, most providers, that missing data, missing attachments, non-covered services, those are going to be the majority of their denials, that they are probably continuing to work, even though we're trying to make it much easier and cleaner to work. Understanding those nuances from every health plan takes time.
Right, and I would just say if anyone has any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out to us, core@caqh.org. And Bob, I'll pass it back to you for our next section here.
Yep, great, and we just have a couple slides here because we do want to set this up for you, that the 2016 market-based adjustment survey is going to be really important. We have launched it, and we need to make sure that the industry knows exactly what it is. And it's the annual opportunity to ensure that the core code combinations meet your business needs, and this is the way to do it. Basically, who can respond? Anyone in the industry that creates, uses, or transmits a transaction, plus any of the core participants can actually submit a response to the survey. So if you're pretty much, if you're hearing my voice this afternoon, you can submit a response to the survey. What does the survey ask? The survey basically looks for and wants input specific to the core code combinations that exist today. So the most current version of the core code combinations and all those combinations that are part of those 4 business scenarios. We want you to look at those and point out where there should be additions. Are there some that are missing? Are there codes that should be removed because they're no longer used? Are there codes that are in the wrong category? Is it in business serial number 4, but it really should be in business serial number 3? Should we relocate them, basically? Should they be moved around? We really want to ensure that your submissions have as much data as possible so that the task group, when they evaluate them, they have the information that you have at your fingertips. That way they can make an informed decision. So information like evaluation criteria, a business case, we call it real world usage data. You've received this denial 24 times a week from Health Plan B, and you always have to drop it to manual and figure out exactly what that means. That's what we're looking for. Why is this so confusing? What can we do as an industry to address those types of problems? So when can you submit them? The survey opened on November 30th, so just last week, and goes until the end of January. So we're within the 60-day period where the industry can submit a response to the survey. So how can you get started? We have a complete set of instructions and a sample survey for you to help you understand exactly what the submission process is. We'll go through a live demo here in just a few moments so you can see exactly what it is as well. We have the link here in this PowerPoint. It's available for free on our website as well. We can send you an email of the link. We'll post this also all on our website. So all the information that you need, hopefully you'll have access to. It's very quick. But as you step up to prepare for a submission, a survey, on the next slide, there's a couple of steps that you need to keep in mind. And those are really get your team together. It's usually not just one person in a provider's office anymore that does just this work, unless you're really in a micro office. So you want to compile your data. What type of denials are you receiving? What types of adjustments are you getting on a daily basis, on a weekly basis that cause you to drop to a manual review process? So reviewing your billing and your AR data. Which ones never auto-post? Which ones do you have to pull down and go to the health plan's website, go to their portal, pick up the phone and understand their eligibility issues or concerns? Determine which code combinations cause the most billing confusion. Some of them you may know that are very easy. You get that, oh, you're missing this particular attachment. Oh, great, we can rebill and include the attachment, and we'll get this to go through as a rebill. But there's also those situations where you don't know exactly what the issue is. You may not know exactly what data to include on the rebill, on the claim. So you have to go through that process. And if you're going through that process, that's where the costs are. That's where your time is being kind of consumed by these particular issues for these particular plans, for these particular benefits, and it's confusing for the provider on how to rebill those. So collecting that information is going to be very important and very helpful as you make submissions on a survey, because it will provide that real-world usage data. So you can finalize the list of your adjustments and get prepared to submit that actually on the survey itself. So kind of doing that little pre-work, understanding the nuts and bolts of your AR and what causes the most grief and concern as a provider will be helpful for you as you really look at the survey and evaluate where the changes and adjustments need to be made. And again, don't forget, it may be we need to add new codes. You're getting a bunch of codes from plans that we don't have yet in our business scenarios. You like to see them there, so make it much easier to go through that rebill cycle or that learning curve, so you never have to rebill. It always goes through first pass. So that's going to be the important steps to take as you get ready for the survey itself. And with that, I'll hand the call back over to Drew for the second polling question.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob. And this brings us to our second polling question. Just like last time, I'll read the question and then open the poll for everyone to respond. And this question asks, does your organization intend to submit a response to the market-based adjustment survey? And I will open the poll and take just a brief minute for everyone to respond. And I do want to point out that if you are answering no to this question, we'd like to hear perhaps why that is. And I'd like to point out that on the handout section of the webinar platform that you have on your screen, you'll find a copy of the slide deck that you can download right from this webinar. And If you are answering no to this question, I would ask that you click the click here link on this slide, and you'll be taken to a very quick 2-question poll to provide some feedback to help us understand the reason that might be. So we'll take about a couple more seconds, and then I'll share the results. And Bob or Omni might get a quick feedback before we move along here. Take about a couple more seconds, and I'll share the results. All right, I'll close the poll and share the results here. Again, large majority here, 68% saying that they're unsure or it's TBD, followed by 70% saying yes, response preparation has just begun with them, 5% saying yes and they're well underway, followed by 2% indicating yes, but they need assistance in developing a response from staff here, and we're happy, of course, to assist you, and then 7% saying no. So if you're in that 7%, please feel free to follow that link that we have on the slide here to help us understand why. But Bob or Omni, what do you make of these results?
Sure, yeah, this is great feedback for us to know. So it looks about 25% are submitting a response, and a couple percent need some help from us, and we're absolutely ready and willing to help you. So please do contact us at core@caqh.org. For the 68% that are unsure or to be determined, I would say you are absolutely in the right place right now. The purpose of this training is to help you understand how you go about filling out a survey response, what the purpose of the survey is. I know there are some individuals who aren't even sure what the survey is and does. So we hope that you find this full hour elucidating, and it helps you to understand, helps make that determination if you will be completing a survey response. And again, if you still have questions, definitely reach out to us.
Very good. And now, Core Project Manager Omni Adekambi will take us through the Market-Based Adjustment Survey, as well as share best practices and resources. Omni?
Great, thank you, Drew. So the next portion of this training, as Drew mentioned, will focus on a live demonstration of the online survey tool and how you can go about entering your submissions after you have identified your list of required adjustments with your team. The online market-based adjustment survey is divided into 2 parts, and we will walk through each part separately. So beginning in part 1 really is an orienting section, as well as where you can register to complete the second section. Part 1 first provides information on the survey background, scope, format, and instructions. It is also where you submit your demographic information in order to register to complete the survey. This registration is important because it is how you receive the unique organization-specific link that you can use to access Part 2. Part 2 of the survey is where you submit the adjustments that your organization wants to make to the core code combination. So as shown on the slide, Part 2 is composed of 2 sections: the introduction section and then the demographic submitter section. We will now take you into the live survey to walk you through completing Part 1. So there are several places you can access the Part 1 link. It's included in this slide deck, but you can also access it via the Core Code Combinations Maintenance page. This is basically our one-stop shop website for all things core code combinations. At the top of this page, you will see we have included a link to the Market-Based Adjustment Survey. When you click on this link, it takes you to this page. As you can see, the first section describes the background of the CAQH Core 360 rule and the maintenance process, which Bob took us through earlier. It also outlines the scope of the 2016 market-based review, noting that, as we have discussed, there are 3 categories of potential code combination adjustments that can be submitted via the online survey, including addition or removal of existing code combinations and relocation of an existing code combination from one core-defined business scenario to another. Scrolling on down, the next page then reviews the format of the online survey as well as the resources that are available to assist with completion of the survey. I want to note again, as Bob mentioned, that there is a sample version of the online survey available. I'd like to encourage everyone to review this online survey before developing your list of adjustments. In addition to this demo, it also is a handy way to have at the top of your mind an understanding of what data and information you will need to submit as part of each adjustment that you want considered by the task group. Moving on, the next page then reviews the last page of Section 1, provides some high-level instructions for completing Part 2, including a table that outlines the completion requirements for each section in Part 2 of the survey, and information on the timeline and requirements. And finally, the last section in Part 1 of the survey is where you complete the submitter information, including name, organization, and other demographic information. It is important to note that the email address that you enter here is the inbox where the email with the link to Part 2 of the survey will go, and where the email confirmations for each adjustment submission will go. So you want to make sure that this is an email address that you and your team will have regular access to. So let's go ahead and register now. In the interest of time, I will put in some brief information. Did not work. Complete stakeholder information. Identify if you are or are not a core participating organization, noting that it is available to both core and non-core participating. And hit next to complete our registration. And then we will receive an email with a link to Part 2 of the survey. So after you have completed Part 1, you will receive an email with a link that you need to complete Part 2. So as you can see in the image on slide 19, you automatically receive an auto-generated email with the link to Part 2, and the email includes a summary of the information you entered in Part 1. When you click on the Part 2 survey link in this email, it takes you to what is titled a navigation page. This is basically the Part 2 home page from where you can start to begin the process to enter each of your submissions. From here, you can select to which of the 4 core-defined business scenarios you want to submit a code combination adjustment. You can also select if you want to delete a previously entered adjustment, or you can choose the Finish Survey option if you are done with all of your adjustments. If you select a business scenario, it takes you to an adjustments page where you select the type of adjustment you want to enter and then can submit it. Again, there are 3 categories of adjustments: additions, removals, and relocations. And within each category, there are various types. So as you can see, there are 5 types of additions, 4 types of removals, and 2 types of relocations. We will now move back into the live demo and walk through submitting one example of each type of adjustment, as well as show you how to delete an entry. So to begin with Part 2, we want to first open up the email we will have received after completing Part 1. When we click on the survey link, so this is an example of the email you will have received. It includes the link to the Part 2 survey that is specific to your organization. When we click on this link, it takes us to this navigation page. Scrolling down, we can see the options to select one of the 4 core defined business scenarios, or to select delete an entry or finish survey. For the purposes of this demo, we will walk through one example each of one of the adjustments each and a deletion. Let's begin with business scenario number 1. So when we select business scenario number 1 and hit next, it eventually takes us to the adjustments page where we can select the type of adjustment that we want to apply. And we'll start at the beginning with adjustment type 1, adding a CARC and RORC combination. So let's go ahead and select addition type 1. We hit next again. And our first step is to enter the number of the CARC and the RORC that we want to add. We'll make it up, and let's say we want to add 16 with M1. And let's go ahead and hit next again. So the next step is to evaluate our submitted new code combination against specified criteria. The core code combinations task group uses a set of evaluation criteria to assess potential changes to the code combinations. For each potential adjustment submitted via the survey, regardless of category or type, submitters will be required to describe how their submission meets the code combinations evaluation criteria. This question, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, is open-ended. So you are provided a text box to describe your analysis. So we'll just go ahead and put in some language. These are required fields, so the box has to have information in it to hit next. Let's just fill the box to hit next. And then the next step section requires an assessment of the business case for the adjustment. This is to help the task group understand why this new RORC combination is needed. For example, would it benefit the entire industry or just the specific organization requesting it? What type of revenue cycle and claims management benefits would result from adding this combination? You are also given another open-ended question to describe the business need for this addition. Again, these are all required fields, so let's go ahead and just click some things and fill out some spaces so we can move forward. And section D is the last section within each potential adjustment submission. This section asks, at your discretion, it is discretionary, to provide, as Bob referred to, real-world usage data to strengthen your business case. This real-world usage data, as Bob described, is basically information on your experience using this code combination that you want added or removed or relocated. If you choose not to provide any data, it is discretionary. You can select no, and you will be taken back to the navigation page to either add new code combinations or delete an entry or finish the survey. If you do have data, which again does strengthen the adjustment, go ahead and hit yes and proceed through. For the usage data submission, we ask to provide information on the time frame of the analysis, what data was reviewed, is it remittance data or claim data, it's one of each, and then describe the analysis. So for example, I used this code combination X times during X period, I had to do X number of phone calls, etc. So again, it's required, let's put some data in to fill the space and move forward. And when we hit next, this completes our adjustment submission and takes us back to the navigation page. We will quickly walk through a removal and a relocation adjustment just to show you that all of the adjustment types have the same 4 A through D subsections. I just want to orient you to that briefly. So opportunity to removal type 1. This time we're removing a CARC, so we'll enter CARC 16. Again, you enter the CARC number. We are again asked to evaluate the removal, again, criteria. We are again asked to provide information on the business case. Is it our organization? What is the outcome? Describe the analysis. And again, we are asked to provide discretionary, at our discretion, real-world usage data. I will choose yes to show you that, again, it's the same setup. What is the time frame of the data? What is the source of the data, claim over remittance? And a summary of what exactly my experience has been. And I hit next. So if I have all of my adjustments aggregated together in a spreadsheet, for example, prior to filling out this form, it really is a quick enter information, and I am done. And finally, a relocation, again, is the same process. It is slightly different in that a relocation is a request to move a code combination from one scenario to another. So let's say I'm moving a RARC 16. I select the scenario to which I want the RARC moved. So I'm currently in this scenario 3, and I want it moved to one of these other scenarios, let's say 1. And then I proceed as usual. I evaluate the criteria for relocation. There are specific criteria for each type of adjustment. I provide information again on the business case. And again, I submit usage data, and in the interest of time, as it is exactly the same, I will say no and go back to the navigation page. And our last adjustment via the online survey is deleting a previous entry. To delete a previous entry, when we select this option from the navigation page, we are taken to this page where there is a drop-down list of all of the entries that you have previously submitted. Each adjustment is identified by entry ID, which is EID and a number, and then you select the entry and hit next. The question becomes, how do you know what entry you want to delete? Easy. For each adjustment that is submitted, I receive an email confirmation. So if I submit 10 adjustments, I receive 10 of these emails. These emails summarize the data that I entered and include the entry ID for that adjustment. So you do want to hold on to these emails and perhaps identify a list of adjustments and a list of the EID, and then if you want to go back and delete the adjustment, you can easily delete it because you have the EID associated with that adjustment. And that takes us through all of the parts of our demo of part 2, then, I believe, Drew.
Great. Wonderful. And let me just take a brief moment here. My screen should be back. And now we're on to our third and final polling question of the webinar. And I will ask it and then launch the poll for everyone to respond. And this one asks, what types of potential adjustments does your organization plan to submit via the market-based adjustment survey? And stand by, and I will launch that right now. So take just a few seconds and to log your response. And then before we move into our next section, I might have Omni or Bob just provide some comments on the results that we get. So take about 10 more seconds, and I'll share the results. I will remind everyone again that the slide deck is available for download right here from the webinar. Just go to the handouts section and it will be right there. Take about a couple more seconds. Try to get over 50% participation. All right, I will close the poll and share the results. Well, I'm noticing a little theme here. Unsure, or TBD, was the largest percentage here. It was 74%, and this was a select all that apply. I should have made that clear, but hopefully you caught that. 70% indicating that addition of new code combinations, 9% equal with removal or relocation, and then 6% indicating that they're not planning to submit. So Bob or Omni, what do you make of these results?
Well, I think I'm noticing the unsure theme. I'm also noticing, though, that we have very few not planning to submit a response, so I think we are speaking to the right audience. Most of the individuals attending are attending because they may be submitting a response, which is great. It is early days. The online survey opened about 8 days ago, so I can understand that individuals haven't determined their list of adjustments yet, so perfectly fair. Do let us know if you need any assistance as you develop those submissions. For those individuals who do know there's responses, it looks like most of those will be additions. So looks like they might submit some new business needs or some new areas that the current code combinations don't quite touch upon. And we are really glad to be able to expand the code combinations and make sure they're reaching all of the industry business needs that they should be. So that's great.
Great. Wonderful. And so we'll carry on. Omni, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thanks, Drew. So we just want to quickly speak to some best practices and tips and options to help with submitting responses before we open it up to questions. And so this is the 4th year of the market-based review. So in all that time, we've identified some best practices. We do want to, again, remind everyone that there is a single email address to which all of these email confirmations and the Part 2 email will come. So you want to make sure that you have a shared email address if possible. Something that some organizations have done is create an email address specific for this project. So perhaps you have a MBR survey at acme.org that your team of individuals in the, in your 835 area can work on together. And so if someone goes out of the office, other people have the ability to get into that email address. So you do want to make sure it's maybe a new email address, maybe not one specific to an individual, but something that is shared and everyone can access. I think we've mentioned this a few times, but having maybe a basic Excel worksheet of submissions with an ID attached to it, the CAQH and the code number, maybe the criteria, etc. Having all of that organized in a spreadsheet is a great idea, especially if you have the EID so that you aren't going back through old emails. Again, with the deletions, as I said, those are listed by the EID, and they don't have the scenario or the code, so definitely keep the EID in your list of submissions, enter it in there as you enter in your adjustment and you get your email, and then just use that essentially as your workhouse for your MBR submissions, that worksheet. And real-world usage data. If you have access to someone in your department, in your organization, if you aren't on that side of the house, get in contact with someone who does, who can get into the system easily and tell you how often you're getting a certain code or how often you're not getting a code and you need to be, and who can get that data to you in an accessible way and really turn it around into the survey responses. Those are definitely very helpful. And finally, some additional resources. So again, we mentioned the sample online survey. Definitely take a look at that as you develop your submissions so you understand what the usage data questions are, for example, what kind of criteria you need to be evaluating your submissions against. Look at the instructions. We didn't speak to that too much today, but there is a instructions document that explains more about actually submitting the online form. It includes a link to some FAQs specific to the MBR, as well as some of the actual MBR specific FAQs in the instructions document. There's only a sample of them. There are many of them, but it tells you where to find the additional ones, so definitely check that out. This online training will be emailed to everyone, but keep it as a resource. Keep it in your back pocket, pass it around to individuals as they join your team so they can get up to speed. And if you have any questions, we are more than happy to have a call with you to talk about the issues with the survey, talk about any potential code combination issues you might want to submit. If you have 3 code combinations that you think have been giving you a pain over the past year and you think you'd like to submit an adjustment for, we're happy to do it, even if it's only 3. There is no problem too big or too small, so please do reach out.
Thank you, Omni. Looks like we have some time for questions now. Just as a reminder to please submit your questions by typing them into the questions panel on your dashboard. And so let's get started. The first question is, are all current CARC and RARC part of the update combinations? For example, I don't see this code in the upcoming update. The code is a RARC and clarifies an adjustment as an EHR adjustment. Omni, can you? Sure.
Actually, just, I'm sorry, Bob. I had a chance to look this one up during Omni's presentation, so I can maybe address it. And Omni, please feel free to weigh in. And this is a great example of the entire CARC and RARC lists. There are hundreds of codes in each of those lists, and the core code combinations are specific to the 4 business scenarios. So only those codes and combinations, those CARCs and RARCs, or sometimes just a CARC and a group code, but those codes in combination are the ones that are specific to those business scenarios. So not every CARC and not every RARC will appear in the core code combinations. And this particular example in this question, the N700, which is specific to the EHR incentive program, an adjustment made to a payment because of an EHR incentive, and other examples like the N701 value-based payment modifier. Those are specific code combinations that are brand new, relatively new. They're available for use beginning March 1st. Those were evaluated by the core code combinations task group, and they didn't fit in. They didn't make it because that particular RARC doesn't match up with a CARC and a RARC combination that fits within our business scenarios. So it's a great example and a great question that illustrates that not every CARC is going to fall within one of those business scenarios. Not every CARC and RARC in combination is going to fit within those business scenarios. So again, we took that 80-20 approach to try to address as many issues as we could for these 4 business scenarios. But there are some that just won't make it in because they don't really fit that definition. But for the survey, we may have missed some combinations that providers are getting and that are still causing confusion. So that's when we want to make sure that the survey is open for those business purposes to ensure the providers have that feedback tool to get those types of code combinations that should be there, get them into the core code combination.
Thank you, Bob. The next question is, what has been the result of the 3 prior year surveys? How many new codes or new code combinations were created? Omni, would you like to answer that?
Sure. This is a good question. I think you actually made a great clarifying point there, Jessica. So the question did ask how many new codes were created. So I want to touch on that a bit. The core code combinations, as Bob referenced, is separate from the CARCs and the RARCs. So the code combinations build on the CARC and RARC code sets. The CARCs are maintained by X12 now and published by Washington Publishing Company. And X12 determines whether or not new codes are added, and the RARCs are maintained by a CMS Medicare committee that determines if new RARCs are added. So when those changes are separate from the code combinations, which kind of respond to the changes to the base standard code list. The annual surveys, with that said, with the annual surveys, I can't think off the top of my head, but as I recall, last year there were some odd 100 and something adjustments. Prior year before, there was a couple hundred. We can absolutely find out that specific numbers. We do, the updated code combinations with the market-based adjustments are published in June of each year. And about a few weeks later, we have a webinar where we include a summary of the adjustments that were made to the code combinations. So those are definitely archived in our Resources and Implementation Center online. So a little digging could definitely find that, but we're happy to also just shoot that information out. So several hundreds of adjustments have been, new code combination adjustments have been included.
Thank you, Omni.
And if I can add to that, Omni makes a really good point in that, you know, it's not 3 or 4 or just 20 or 30 codes. It's usually hundreds of codes that are added, removed, deleted, relocated through the market-based review. So it's a lot of effort by the industry to make sure that the core code combinations are meeting the business needs. So feel free. We really do want to make sure that the core code combinations do meet the need, and by ensuring that the survey is completed by providers and providers that are being most impacted by the manual processes that have to be put in place to understand the reasons for adjustments and denials is really important. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you so much to Omni and Bob for comprehensively answering that question. So the next question I see here is about how much time does it take to prepare and to complete the 2 parts of the survey? Can we give people a little bit of a window between now and January 31st, how much time they should be allocating to this?
Sure, I can speak to that, and I welcome Bob speaking to it also. In terms of, well, maybe I'll take the easy part, let Bob have the hard part. In terms of completing the actual online survey, I think as we walk through with the demo, it's not much time once you have completed the actual work of putting together a list of submissions. So it's kind of like filling out your taxes. Once you've actually gathered all the work of putting together your tax form, and then you go to H&R Block or IRS.gov or wherever I have an accountant, and actually go online to fill out the information. It's quite easy to do the filling out online part. The back end part depends on how expensive your taxes need to be. If you have 2 code combination adjustments, you've talked with your team and they say our code combinations at, you know, Acme Hospital are fantastic, and I only have one thing that's ever bothered me in the past 265 days, probably going to take you an hour to prep to submit a submission. But you have 300 things. Well, I'm sorry for your hospital for one, but it's also going to take a lot more time to prep for that submission. Bob?
No, yeah, I agree. I think that it's really important for providers to understand that the need for their data is important, so that because not all the providers and provider organizations necessarily are part of the task group. So for those organizations that have the data, that kind of live and breathe this every day, to bring that into the process and share that data with the task group is really beneficial, so the task group can make a really, instead of an educated guess, can actually make a learned decision about should this code be included or should it not? What kind of impact is this really having? Are you seeing it once every 6 months, or are you seeing it 10 times a day? You know, that type of data is really important, and that will impact, obviously, your submission process and how often or how many you may have. But you know, if most of the providers could take those 5 or 10 codes that cause the most problem, that are the most hard or most difficult to understand, that cause them lots of manual review, every health plan does it, or reports it a little bit differently. It should really be this way, but everyone's doing it differently. Those types of problems that you're seeing on a daily basis can really inform the task group in their decisions.
Thank you, Bob. I think what I'm hearing both of you say is if there's something that's giving you a problem, and all year long you keep thinking, why is this one code giving me a problem? There's something you can do about it by filling out this survey. So the next question is, my organization has a potential new business scenario. When can I submit that? Because I know it's not part of this process, but is that?
Sure. Yeah. I can speak to that. We actually, so this scenario, this MBR is not collecting new core defined business scenarios. That collection is actually a bit on hold because I think, as Bob mentioned, the core code combinations of core defined business scenarios are federally mandated, and to get any new business scenarios, The task group agreed that they wanted to look at new business scenarios only on the contingency that they would be incorporated within the mandate. And so the process for that has not been 100%, outlined yet. So essentially, the task group, after some consideration and some extended discussion and some surveying and the whole process, agreed that they would reopen they did collect some scenarios and they didn't think those quite qualified yet. So they decided they would not collect additional new scenarios until they had outlined the process for which any that they did think did merit addition could be incorporated to the mandate.
That's good to know. So right now we've got 4 business scenarios, and that's what we're working through.
Yep.
Changes to those.
Yep.
Great. And then one final question, because we're almost a little bit out of time here, is what do I do if I have technical problems during submission? I think that's probably pretty obvious. We've been talking about it throughout the whole webinar, right? Email us, call us. We're here to help.
Yes, core@caqh.org is your lifeline for all questions and concerns.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that we keep trying to reinforce is we are here to help you. We want to make this easy for you. And now it looks like we're out of time. I would like to thank our colleagues who spoke today, as well as our audience, for taking time out of your schedules to join us. We are in the process of planning our webinars for next year and to have some good content plans. So keep checking on our website for new webinars. We also have some new e-learning modules under development, but here are the ones that we have currently available. And if you have further questions or interested in learning more about core and core topics, these are various ways of reaching us, including, as you can see there, code combination maintenance. And that's it. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.